I'd never heard of any UFO sightings like that before, but after listening to other people, other accounts and reports, there have been quite a few reports of flickering kind of UFOs going across the sky. But I just thought, wow, what an amazing world we live in, where something like that just makes you so curious and you don't know what it is.
All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Odd Virginia. My name's Alex Koska, and I'll be your host for the show. Today we're interviewing Chai Gallahan, a former U.S. Air Force serviceman who has also had an extensive career in journalism. Now, this man's experienced a lot of things, as well as heard many accounts in his time in the military and in journalism. But he also has a wonderful intellectual curiosity. So for a while there, we couldn't help but go down a few rabbit holes, opining to one another on topics where the paranormal intersects with conspiracy theory. We talked for a while about Bigfoot and Sasquatch, UFOs, and ended up somehow getting into the flat earth, North American giants, and mass media manipulation. And I wasn't exactly in my zone for this interview, so thank God for Chai being as professionally well-spoken as he is a breeze to listen to. You're going to love hearing from Chai, and if you do, there's more to come, because on our Patreon or our Buzzsprout memberships page, you'll be able to hear a round 2 to this episode, just another hour of conversation with Chai Gallahan. Consider signing up, becoming a supporter if you like what you hear from Chai, and you'll get access to a whole nother episode with this fine individual. If that round 2 episode is not available right away when this one uploads, it will be very soon. At the moment, I've fallen behind a little bit, and I'm on a time crunch. Things have been hectic over here. I've been working overtime hours while they're available, and I'm about to have a very much-needed vacation. So for the month of September, we're taking a break from the show. I'm not taking a break from the show personally. I still need to work on it. We need to get more interviews for the month of October, our spookiest season of the year, and you'll be hearing back from us in October. But in the meantime, I'm going to get a little bit of sunlight on my skin and some sand between my toes, and we'll see you again in October. Now, if you'd like to be on the show in October, please consider sending me an email at oddvirginia@protonmail.com. That's oddvirginia@protonmail.com. Or consider calling the Little Oddities voice line and just leave a short story in the form of a voicemail. You can call that number, which is 540-416-9690. That's the Little Oddities voice line at 540-416-9690. Just leave your name, what happened to you, where and when. Love to hear about it. Because here at Odd Virginia,
we're ready to believe you.
Okay, today on the show, I've got Chai Gallahan. Chai, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thanks for having me on your show. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you on, man. I recently got to listen to your lecture at the American Legion 501st. No, that's Star Wars.
That's Stormtroopers.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't the 501st. It was the
American Legion Post 146.
146. That's the one. And I got to hear a little bit of a talk from you about personal paranormal experiences, as well as things that you've heard while you're in the U.S. Air Force. Now, before we begin, do you want to give us just a brief biography on yourself and kind of give everyone sort of an idea of where you've been and what you've done throughout your life?
You bet. I grew up here in Central Virginia, Hopewell, Virginia, and after I graduated high school, I wanted to see the world, travel, and serve my country, so I signed up for the Air Force. I had a career in the Air Force for 20 years and got to see a few places and visit a few interesting locations, and I met quite a few extraordinary people who told me some of their experiences. After I retired from the Air Force, I came back home and began my second career in journalism, working at the Hopewell News and several other local newspapers, including the Progress Index right here in the Tri-Cities of Central Virginia. During that time, too, I broke it up with a 3-year contract for Lockheed Martin, where I went back to MacDill Air Force Base, where I was at Special Operations Command Headquarters, and then as a contractor at Central Command Headquarters. And so after that contract was up, I came back to Hopewell and kept working in journalism. And now I'm with the media company who produces video content at lnnusa.com. And I'm interested in the unusual and the strange, the mysteries of our world, and the paranormal.
Now, I'm sure that anyone listening who is anything at all like me
when they hear the words Lockheed Martin, their ears perk up. Anyone at all who's interested in the paranormal, they're like, oh, Lockheed Martin, that's a rather big name as far as weapons technology. And not only that, but like secret programs.
Yes. And in fact, I have to give you a little bit of background on my Air Force career to lead up to my involvement with Lockheed Martin. I had one of the strangest military career arcs that I've ever heard of. I'm sure other people have too. I wanted to originally go into visual information, which deals with satellite imagery and graphic design and things of that nature, because I sort of have that as a natural talent. And my recruiter told me that I didn't need to have a guaranteed job when I joined the Air Force, because my art portfolio, he said, it would give me a 98% chance of getting into visual information. And so naturally, I believed him. And I know he meant well, but of course, somehow that 2% I fell into, and I didn't get into visual information. And I ended up as a cook in the dining hall. And I was embarrassed and upset and a little angry, but I just embraced it as another kind of art form. And after a few years working in the dining facilities and in the services squadron, which encompasses, food service accounting and some other various career fields, I eventually cross-trained into visual information. And that led to me having to get a top secret clearance at Minot Air Force Base. And then I applied for a special duty assignment at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, at the Joint Intelligence Center Pacific. I thought, hey, it's a pie in the sky kind of dream, but I'm going to fill out the paperwork, do what I need to do, and just roll the dice and see what happens. And I did, and I ended up getting the position, which meant I had to upgrade my top secret clearance to what's called top secret SCI, and that stands for Secure Compartmented Information Clearance, which is like they have to do a psychological evaluation, clear you health, and you can't be compromised in any way. And it costs about, this is back in the mid 90s, it costs about $60,000 to $70,000 for the government to send out investigative agents to talk to your friends and family, when they upgrade your clearance. And I started getting phone calls from my friends asking me, hey, Chai, are you okay? Did you get in any kind of trouble or something? Because I had 2 agents come up to my house asking me questions about you. And I laughed and I said, no, they're just talking to everyone I put on the list of my acquaintances, friends, and family. And they're just trying to find out if I'm like some bad kind of guy, So anyway, I got those clearances and went into my first intelligence assignment. And once you get into intel, they want to keep you there because they've expended so much money and time to get your clearance. And so from that point on in your career, you're in the defense intelligence circles. And so after that, I was assigned to the 36th Intelligence Squadron, which was part of the 480th Intelligence Group at Langley Air Force Base under Defense Intelligence Agency and Air Combat Command. And after that, when 9/11 happened, I was just randomly or maybe selected to go on a temporary assignment. It's called a TDY in the Air Force, to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to work with the Joint Special Operations Command and Special Operations Command headquarters. And JSOC, those guys are like Delta Force. They kick down doors. They're the ones that the movies are all made about, Green Berets and Navy SEALs, those people. And I got to work with these guys, these heroes. And I got to apply my visual information knowledge and skill to help produce briefings. And of course, none of this is classified. I'm not telling you anything you shouldn't know. And so we would go to different places and brief at the Pentagon, many times at different intel agencies. We briefed the State Department, FBI, U.S. ambassadors, vice president at the time. We would provide them with operational recommendations based on the stuff that we knew. And of course, the organization that I was part of was formed on September 12th, 2001, if that gives any clue to what its purpose was. So I was finally offered a permanent position at SOCOM headquarters at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida, where I ended up retiring from my military service there. So after that happened, that's when I said I came home and got into journalism. And then I had connections, friends and people, and they said, hey, Chai, Lockheed Martin is wanting to hire you. And I said, really? And so there were some phone calls involved, and they made me an offer that I just couldn't refuse. The pay was fantastic for a 3-year contract, and I would go back to MacDill Air Force Base. But this time, instead of working at Special Ops headquarters in Tampa at MacDill, I was at Central Command headquarters, working at their Joint Intelligence Operations Center. And we were editing for grammar and content the daily executive intelligence highlights that were provided to as a morning briefing to then General Petraeus and then his successor, General Mattis. And as whoever might be listening might know, those two guys went on to some prominent positions in our government. I believe Petraeus, well, I don't believe it. General Petraeus became the director of the, I like to call it the A1 Steak Sauce Agency, so we don't like raise any flags, but it's the alphabet agency that begins with C. And then General Mattis went on to some kind of cabinet position under the Trump administration. But it was neat. It was an honor. It was a lot to learn. And that's part of my career arc, too. When I retired as a visual information subject matter expert for SOCOM, Special Ops. And then when I worked for Lockheed Martin and subsequently SAIC for that 3-year contract, I transitioned into full intel and became a bona fide intelligence analyst. Now, I didn't go and get the training out at Fort Huachuca or wherever they went, but I was functioning as an intelligence analyst at Central Command's Joint Intelligence Operations Center. So I began as a cook and ended up in Special Ops and Intel. So that's my career arc.
I've got to say, that is quite incredible. And if you're anyone like me who likes to listen to Dr. Stephen Greer on the regular, Stephen Greer brings up General Petraeus on the regular. I feel like it's a very notable name as far as, you know, the whole defense situation is concerned. This is a man who has been a big part of American defense technology companies for a long time. And here you are working right beneath him.
Yes, it was really interesting. I passed him in the hallway a few times. He was on his way out. He was transitioning out to his next assignment, which was the big assignment. And I got to tell you, though, he's a guy, from everything that I saw, had a lot of integrity, was the utmost professional, very intelligent. He changed the way that the country managed the situation in Afghanistan. And I have the highest respect for him. And everything I heard about him from people who worked directly with him, very positive. In fact, his speechwriter I believe it was his speechwriter. She was a major, and she worked in our section as an intel analyst as well. And it was really fun being a part of that group. It was I was part of the daily production group. So I think that was one of the highlights of my career. And it was funny because it was post-military. So, I didn't have to wear a uniform. I just had to, dress in civvies. And it was a lot easier going than it would have been had I been active duty military.
Well, it's good to hear that from you. And thank you for sharing all that background information. You've really had just a wealth of experience in your life so far. Let's get into really quickly your personal experiences, because I think that's what we're here for today. What is the first time that you've ever had a brush with the paranormal?
Oh, very good question. Well, I've been interested, as we spoke about, in the unusual, the strange since I was a kid, watching the series In Search Of, hosted by Leonard Nimoy, and then watching Kolchak the Night Stalker, about a reporter who encounters the paranormal. My first real encounter with the paranormal was a bit strange, and I don't know if I relayed this to you in our preliminary conversations, and I certainly didn't talk about it at my lecture at the American Legion. We just ran out of time. and this is also as a preamble or a caveat to the reason that I felt it was important to sort of give a gloss over of my military career, was that I worked with a lot of professionals and professional people who've got top secret clearances and above top secret clearances, and that's not the technical term, it's top secret SCI, and they've got these SAP clearances, special access programs, because at a certain point you stop going higher and you just get read into bubbles, special access programs, and you're only read into the programs you need to know about. So my point is, worked with a lot of professionals. So the stuff that people told me, it's going to be like from people who have nothing to prove and a lot to lose if their name gets out. So my personal encounter with the paranormal was after I graduated high school. the last summer that I spent at home before I left for the Air Force that December. And it spooked me like I've never been spooked. And I'll have to explain just briefly. In about sixth grade, I joined up with the Civil Air Patrol. And I loved that organization. It's an Air Force auxiliary, and it's like the Boy Scouts, but you're actually an Air Force auxiliary, and they teach you how to drill, that's march, and they teach you about military customs and protocols and history about the Air Force. You take tests, you get promoted, just like in the military. It preps you for the military. And if you get promoted to a certain rank in the Civil Air Patrol, you enter the Air Force at a higher promotion grade. Like instead of going in as a no striper and you get a warrant officer status in the Civil Air Patrol, you'll go in as a two striper. That'll save you a couple of years of advancement, and it'll also give you a higher pay rate right off the bat. So the reason I mention this is because in the Civil Air Patrol, you go out in the woods, you camp, they teach you land navigation with a compass and with topographical maps, and survival, search and rescue is a big part of Civil Air Patrol. So from sixth grade on, I was hiking through the woods with my other two friends who were in the Civil Air Patrol, wearing camouflage, fatigues, jungle boots. We're talking military surplus gear, web gear, canteens, military flashlights that look like, they've got the hook shape to them, backpacks, camping. So we would go without the camping gear, but we'd have machetes and BB guns and camo face paint. And even when we went out in the wintertime, we'd rip up some sheets and white sheets and put those on our camos so we'd blend into the background. And I grew up next to Fort Lee, Virginia. It's now called Fort Greg Adams. But the woods directly behind my house have a creek system that feed into the creek system that led onto Fort Lee wilderness land. There weren't any signs back then saying no trespassing, so we didn't realize we were going onto Fort Lee land. But we would just follow the creek and just, go out in those areas. So my entire life from sixth grade on, I was a master of the woods. In other words, I was completely comfortable. I knew what to do. I knew first aid, all this stuff. We went out there and explored. So my point is, I felt comfortable. So my friends end up joining the Air Force and leaving before I did because they were older or they moved away. So I was by myself, and I had no problem going into the woods by myself. Never. During heavy thunderstorms with lightning and thunder, heavy torrents of rain, no problem. Even I'd led my friends on what I called an adventure course, going across logs over the deep creek banks at nighttime with the moonlight through the trees, completely safe and comfortable.
I can definitely relate to a lot of that.
That's good. That's good. It's a great way to grow up. Well, anyway, so my friends are gone. I was out by myself, and I went out into the woods wearing my camo and stuff, just enjoying the woods. Beautiful. Love the woods. And so I had finished up and was heading up this ravine that fed into a field, a thorny field of thickets leading, if I hiked, to my backyard area eventually. And I was emerging from the woods, and I happened to notice this very large pine tree. I'd say it was about maybe 3 feet in diameter. Something, maybe lightning or old age, had broken this tree or cracked it. And at about 10 feet high was where the tree had splintered and the top part had fallen down. And I was coming in behind a row of houses that had backyard fences and stuff. And I had to pass through these brambles to get to my yard about maybe 200 or 300 yards in the distance through bushes and stuff. And so this German Shepherd in one of the backyards of one of these houses was barking at me. And I thought, oh man, okay, this is perfect. I can practice a stealth game. And my objective was to sneak past this dog, camouflaging behind the bushes and navigating the thickets and the thorns, and to, make it to my backyard. And I was waiting underneath this tree where it had broken about 10 feet up. So I was underneath that little A shape from the broken tree. And I was waiting and waiting for like 10 minutes. And the dog kept barking. And I was looking at the dog thinking, he can't see me. I'm behind these bushes and stuff. And I realized after I was looking at him, he wasn't barking at me. He was barking at something past me. And the hair in the back of my neck stood up and I got goosebumps. And I thought, And I'd never experienced this in the woods. That's why I had to go through that extensive explanation of Civil Air Patrol, hiking through the woods. I'd never felt like this before. Something had spooked me. And I'm looking at the dog and I'm looking behind me and I scan behind me visually, don't see anything, but the dog is still barking. And I'm thinking, all right, you know what? My spidey sense is going off. Never had this happen, but I'm going home. I don't care about these thickets. And I just walked through the thickets and they scratched me through my camo pants. And I just made my way pressing through the thickets and bushes and I got scratched up and I left. I make it to out into the field of tall grass and I look back, the dog's still barking to where I was. And that tree that had cracked and splintered breaks off right where I'd been underneath and it slams to the ground. I feel the ground shake. No one would have found me. I would have been listed as missing. And then somebody, if I was lucky, would have said, hey, there's this strong smell coming from my backyard. And I would have been found by cadaver dogs had I remained under that tree in that little area I told you about.
Oh, gosh.
And I didn't see anything, but I felt something was watching me. And so, yeah, I didn't see like a creature or a distortion or anything. I just had a feeling. I left and it was fortunate. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this phone call.
What is the supposition as to what that was?
Well, you know, I got to tell you this first. I've never been back into any woods by myself since then. I've only gone with other people. And that was the last time I've been in these woods in my own backyard alone since that happened. Well, this is my intuition, my educated speculation.
Yeah, there's no way to know.
Yeah, I felt like something was watching me. I felt like something was stalking me, and I don't know if it was up in the trees, and that's why I couldn't see it, or I didn't know if it was somehow concealed in a way that I wasn't looking for because I had no idea. You know, of course I'd seen cloaking devices in shows like Star Trek, but at the time I wasn't thinking something's cloaked. I was looking for like something or someone back there. I believe something or someone was stalking me and it was somehow concealed. And I think that we as a species have an ancestral kind of talent or skill or memory that informs us of when we're being stalked. And it helped me, I have to say, because had I remained there waiting for that dog to stop barking, I might have been crushed by that tree. So I think something was following me. It really spooked me. And again, I'd been hiking through the woods since, 5th, 6th grade on.
And you don't have any idea as to what it was?
No. Yeah, because I didn't see anything. I only have what I intuited. I've never felt like that again since I've been in the woods. But I felt something was there, and it was behind me. I didn't have the ability to see it. Now it could have been on a different aspect or frequency of the visual spectrum. Because the visual spectrum that humans see in is very limited compared to what the entire electromagnetic spectrum is. We just see a tiny fraction of it. So something could have been standing right behind me. And if it was on a different wavelength that my eyes weren't created to see, I would never have seen it.
Yeah, humans can only see from red to about violet in the light spectrum. So there are things that can exist beyond or before those frequencies that we certainly cannot see. And that's been very well proven. There are entities that seem to show themselves within those frequencies of light that we can't see, but we can feel, we can intuit that they're there, but we're not aware of them necessarily visually.
That's right. And it also extends into pheromones, because maybe, pheromones are like a smell that we can't actually know we're smelling, but the chemicals are interpreted by our brain and give us a reaction, and we're not exactly sure why we're feeling a certain way about somebody or something. It's like when you meet the right person, right? You meet the right girl or whatever, you meet the right person and you're like, I'm just really into this person. And a lot of scientists have said, and I'm not saying this is only what its attraction's about, but apparently if they're sending off the right pheromones that your body's responding to and you're sending off the right ones to them, that might be that chemistry we're talking about. So maybe there might have been some pheromones that I was picking up completely unaware of because we aren't consciously aware of our detection of those pheromones, but we just have a gut feeling about something or someone. And that might have come into play too, where this thing might have been exuding some really powerful pheromones that gave me that goose flesh and made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. And I got to tell you, that's pretty much the only time in my life where I felt like that, where I was spooked like that. So something was going on. And so I believe something or someone was behind me, and they were somehow concealed from my limited human senses.
I definitely know that feeling, and I've had it myself as well. Now, here's something that you may be a bit keen to, as you are a former member of the USAF. I've recently read an account or heard an account from another member of the USAF, and they were serving in Afghanistan, but I want to say within the past 10 years. This is a person who was doing flyovers over Afghanistan, and they would do basically recon missions. They'd check out areas before the army would go in, and managed to find a humanoid figure, I want to say. Now, the details are going to be a little bit fuzzy because I don't remember exactly what the details were in the account. However, there was something humanoid that was digging in the ground, as far as I remember. And one of the pilots decided they were going to pinpoint that figure by using an infrared laser beam. They shone that laser beam down on this figure, directly pinpointed it, and it used its hand to block the light, as if it could see what was coming down on it. And then it ended up fleeing the scene. That's something incredibly weird because, humans cannot see infrared light. This was something that looked like a human-ish, but it was able to see that light and then flee the scene as soon as it saw it.
That is really interesting. I hadn't heard of that account, but it leads me immediately to think, why couldn't nature or whatever created life, or evolution, whatever, intelligent design, why couldn't some creatures be created to see more of the visual spectrum or more of the electromagnetic spectrum? Like you said earlier, there are things that we can't see that bees can see. There are ultraviolet markings on flowers, essentially saying, come get my nectar, it's the sweetest. And bees can see this, and other insects can see this, but we have no idea it's even there on the petals. So it's not a far stretch to imagine that there are creatures or life forms out there that can see infrared. So to them, it would be like a bright laser.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't find it hard to believe that maybe other creatures might be able to sense infrared as well. In fact, the ability for dogs to track people may not only be their olfactory or sense of smell. They say that a dog's sense of smell is up to 10,000 times greater than ours, and that can also be, but it might also be the fact that maybe they can see a little bit into the infrared and can track the heat prints of whatever they're trying to follow too. We just don't know, and there's no way we can know. So I don't think it's far-fetched to think that there could be a very stealthy kind of creature that looks human-like, humanoid, who would be able to look up and see a beam coming from an aircraft pointed right at it, because it'd have to see it if it put its hand up and blocked it.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that a lot of Sasquatch researchers talk about, and me being me, the assumption is that was a Sasquatch. Infrared cameras are basically the main point of camera traps, and everyone says that camera traps are incredibly ineffective. Perhaps these things can see the infrared beams and just avoid them. That's sort of an assumption that I've made as far as why can't we get these things on camera very often?
I would concur because, and I've thought about this myself, because we have so many people saying, well, why don't you just put a trail cam up there? And so what do? They go put a trail cam up there. They put these trail cams on trees. They strap them to the trees. They turn them on. They put the memory card in them. Good to go. And they put a bunch of them up. They don't catch Bigfoot, a.k.a. Sasquatch. And like you said, people are asking, well, I saw this with my own eyes and I just wanted to capture it on camera, and I'm not getting it. If they can see on the infrared spectrum, then those cameras might as well be flashing a big light saying, hey, here's where I am, and they could be avoiding those areas. And I've heard accounts of people who have moved into like the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. They bought their land. They got like 5 acres and they have a house, and the woods come right up to their back deck, and they've got a long driveway that leads to the little road, that the access road to their neighborhood, where other neighbors are like 5 acres away. And I've heard accounts of people having some problems with something or someone banging on their house, essentially like harassing them almost at nighttime. And so what they did was they put up the lights with the sensor beam, where if you cross the infrared or whatever kind of beam they're sending out, it turns on the light for that area. And I've heard accounts of people who have put those lights up and they get tripped off the first night or two, but then afterwards trees are broken, and they mark the territory where they shouldn't cross to trip the light. So somehow those whatevers you want to call it, Bigfoot or Sasquatches, according to these people, have marked off the area where they know where the beam crosses, so they make sure that they don't cross those beams. So they're avoiding detection.
And it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. So those 2 accounts, and I'm sure there's so many more, I wouldn't put it past nature to create, an eyeball that can detect infrared. A lot of our technology is based on that. You were talking about Lockheed Martin, and have high technology and all that stuff. Forward-looking infrared radar, FLIR, is what a lot of search and rescue teams use to try to find missing people. And it works. And a lot of investigators use FLIR when they're out in the woods and the mountains to detect, anything in the woods. You pick up deer, you pick up elk, you pick up bears. And a few times, these infrared cameras and detectors pick up some humanoid-looking creatures in the woods. FLIR also helped detect the Tic Tac UFO that the government released when they released their video back in 2017 about that Tic Tac UFO caught by the Nimitz carrier group off the coast of California in the Pacific. So something's going on.
Yeah, FLIR is a technology that's basically a mainstay within Sasquatch research right now. You'll hear about people all the time, especially Todd Standing talks about this because he's had contact with people who are in military personnel, and they specifically know how to point out Sasquatch, according to him, when they're flying over U.S. forests.
Now, that's a really interesting thing. Now, Todd Standing is a longtime Bigfoot researcher, and I believe if it's the same guy I'm thinking about, he had become really good, close friends with David Paulides, who is a Bigfoot researcher too. Is that the same Todd Standing I'm thinking about?
I'm not sure that they're friends at all. I've never heard of this connection.
Okay, because no, not Todd Standing. I'm thinking of Scott Carpenter.
Scott Carpenter,
That's who
rest in peace. He died last week.
Exactly. I was going to bring that up. And so I mixed it up with Todd Standing. But yeah, Scott Carpenter is a researcher too, Bigfoot researcher, along with David Paulides. And they went out and got DNA and had it studied at labs. And it was proven that, according to them, they published a scientific paper using their work and Dr. Melba Ketchum, who is a renowned forensics eyewitness subject matter expert at many, many trials, thousands of trials. And when they researched the DNA of Bigfoot that they captured, it was human and something they didn't know. but anyway, so I'm sorry, I sidetracked us, but you were talking about Todd Standing.
Well, actually, the Scott Carpenter stuff is way, way more interesting because he's the guy who decided that instead of using conventional methods of finding Bigfoot DNA, he was just going to use Scotch tape. He used double-sided Scotch tape, stuck it on trees, put some treats up, and was like, I hope I get some hair. And he did.
That's right. Keep it simple. They just kept it simple.
Really, he did. And he ended up getting almost 100 samples of Bigfoot hair, and that was all analyzed. And you're right. The determination was that based on the mitochondrial DNA, that the female side was human and the male side was unknown primate. And
yes,
we're still really not sure what that unknown primate is.
That's right. It's never been cataloged or officially scientifically identified or categorized compared to any DNA we've ever seen. So they have no idea what it is.
No, and this is something that gets your biblical guys like me going in a frenzy. Like, this is the Nephilim. This has got to be the Nephilim. Well, we don't know that for sure, but oh my gosh, it seems like it.
That's right. David Paulides has published a book called, what is it? Bigfoot, Wild Men, and Giants. And I believe the Bible talks about giants.
Quite extensively, yes.
Yeah, and several authors, including Zachariah Sitchin and Steve Quayle, have written books that you can get about giants, Genesis 6 giants, and this, that, and the other, the Anunnaki. It really sort of like blossoms into a wide field of specific research. And I've delved into it a little bit, but there's so much, it's hard for one person to read it all and recall it. But yeah, definitely, the Bible talks about these kinds of beings. And some people say that's what Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and all these things are. There are even reports of actual giants that are 20 feet to 40 feet tall in North America and the rest of the world. But they're very good at stealth. They're very good at hiding.
Yeah, and that is the case. On this podcast, we've actually had articles from the New York Times read aloud where there were instances of railroad workers who were digging railroads, blasting through mountains, uncovering these giant tombs. And very, very interesting. It's something that will never cease to interest me. Anasazi legend of the red-haired giants that they used to fight against in order to just have peace in their own homeland. These are things that are absolutely incredible to me. I absolutely love these legends, but when the quote-unquote white man came to settle, this was already over. And so we don't really have that much of a historical record other than what people began to uncover when they started building, say, railroads or started doing coal mining.
Oh, yeah. Survey crews come across these things. There have been reports of mummified red-haired giants found in China.
Yeah.
There are out-of-place objects. What are they called? Out-of-place objects. They're OOBs or something like that. But Michael Cremo, have you heard of him?
I have not.
He is a researcher. He's got a book out there you can order called Forbidden Archaeology. Now, the original tome is like a college doctoral thesis textbook that's like huge, but he's released one for lay people like me that goes through and just essentially gives you the essential facts in simple terms. Michael Cremo, Cremo, but I've got his book here somewhere. But he talks about where in coal mines, in coal strata that should be like 200 million years ago, right? According to modern geological theory, it should be 200 million years old. They're finding human artifacts, hammers and tools and footprints where they shouldn't even be. And so,
I've heard of this, of nearly 2 million year old artifacts or corpses of humans in the North American continent. And this doesn't seem to correlate with much of the theory, according to anthropologists.
Oh, yeah. And it goes against the official narrative. They've discovered mounds in North America all over the place. When they dig them up, they find the remnants of giant skeletons. And just farmers tilling their fields, clearing the stones, they're trying to clear it up so they can farm, and they discover the remains of giants. So back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they would contact the Smithsonian Institute or the government. Somehow the Smithsonian would come, they'd dig up the bones, and they'd take them off to study them, and people never heard from the Smithsonian again. And the Smithsonian claims they don't have these giant skeletons, but there are dozens and dozens and dozens of newspaper accounts where people have discovered giant remains on their land. The Smithsonian or some other government organization has come out, taken the bones for study or whatever reason, and those bones are never heard of again. It's like as if that warehouse at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark really does exist.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly true what we saw on Raiders. especially among the Appalachian Mountains, it seems like there was a lot of just people going through the mountain trying to clear passageways, discovering things that they shouldn't discover, contacting the Smithsonian, and for some reason the Smithsonian, for whatever reason, decided that this is classified.
Yeah.
And it was never heard about again.
It makes you wonder, because why don't they want us to know that there were beings, humanoids, on this world that were a lot taller than we are? And it just seems like every 5 to 10 years they're discovering a new site where they're finding humanoids that are smaller. I mean, about 10 or 20 years ago, within the last 20 years, they found what they called the Hobbit creature.
Homo floresiensis.
You're familiar with it? Yeah, these fully grown creatures were the size of hobbits compared to us, and they were fully grown. They weren't children. You've got the Star Child skull that was discovered that completely looks alien and has these unexplained fibrous threads that are interwoven throughout the skull. So we're finding anomalous results that are showing that there are different sizes of humans or humanoid beings. And also one more, they found a mummified body of a 6-inch creature in the Atacama Desert in South America.
I'm aware. Yeah, Stephen Greer was very, very much into this.
And see, that's where I think it's fascinating, because in this realm of the paranormal, regardless of where you start researching, whether it's cryptids, cryptozoological creatures, UFOs, the oil conspiracy, that it's not the remains of dinosaurs in forests, and no matter where you begin researching into these different topics, eventually they're going to crisscross, and you're going to find yourself learning about something in other topics. Because Greer is a big UFO disclosure guy, and yet he's talking about this 6-inch mummified creature that was found in the Atacama Desert. And it just makes you wonder, that leads you into all these giant remains and hobbit remains. And recently, within the last few months, I believe they found even another species, and I forget the details. I just saw the report within the last 3 weeks about another smaller humanoid species.
When it comes to, ancient Egypt, Egyptology, archaeology in ancient Egypt, there are a lot of facts that seem to come to light that the mainstream doesn't want to recognize. And it's the same with archaeological records in North America, that there are things that mainstream science don't want to recognize. And I'm not sure why that is, because usually they're trying to uphold a certain narrative. Like, usually what we're looking for is the narrative of evolution, the Darwinism sort of theories. And Homo floresiensis tends to uphold that theory in essence, but the giants or Gigantopithecus tend not to in certain circumstances. And I'm wondering why they just don't recognize these scientific facts that have been found out, especially when it comes to Egyptology and the degradation of the, the Sphinx. They definitely don't want to recognize the water erosion that's going on there. Now, I'm wondering why not.
That's true. And it leads me to think that history has been covered up, edited, and altered for us to believe a certain narrative. And again, that's a great question. Why would they do this? What about our history is so dangerous, so important, that they don't want us to know about? Because there's no other reason to cover it up. And in a lot of TV shows and movies that I would see and books that I would read growing up and up until now, we get the cliche. It's so cliche, you think, yeah, whatever, you sort of gloss by it. The cliche is history is written by the victors. And it's obvious, and everyone knows this, but you're like, whatever. Yeah. But I think that somebody won, and it wasn't necessarily in our best interest. And they wrote the history that we've been fed. And we just believe it because we were told this from the time we were old enough to understand anything in a classroom. We were told and given a history, and we just believed it because we were told it was true. We actually have no evidence that any of our history happened the exact way that we were told. Lots of things were omitted. Lots of things were changed. And as a lot of us have discovered, it's blatant that some things were deliberately altered, even in recent times. But I think at some fundamental era, some grand events happened, and history for some reason has been covered up. Why? Who knows? But they don't want us to know the truth about our world and the nature of our reality and even our most fundamental history.
Yeah, well, none of us were there when it happened. And a lot of these things probably wouldn't have been given to us when it happened anyway. So it's very difficult to really know the fundamental nature of reality. And here we are trying to piece it together. And thank God for the internet, because now we have this forum by which we are not controlled as to what we say. A little bit more so nowadays, but especially at the beginning, we could share information very freely and figure some things out on our own or together.
Exactly. And they can't stop it, because that back in 2017, when I had my radio show here in Hopewell at WHAP, that's when Google and YouTube came out and Facebook, and they said, hey, we need to stop this. This is dangerous. There is a lot of disinformation and misinformation being put out on our social media platforms. We're going to police this. We're going to clean it up and keep these dangerous ideas away from you. And the things that they decided to clean up were some people who looked into the actual facts and news coverage using official news coverage video, unaltered, about mass shootings. I'm not going to mention any names. Don't want to get you banned. And they looked into other conspiracy theories. That's the big label they put on them. These theories are so dangerous, we have to keep them from telling you the truth. One of the things that they edited and deleted channels over and removed videos about, other than the mass shooting stuff, the research, was flat Earth. And to me, I'm thinking, look, all right,
yeah,
why would you think that's such a dangerous idea that I can't just watch it for entertainment and decide for myself, weigh the facts and see for myself and make my own decisions for myself? So there's something about this, and the truth is getting out there. I'm not saying that any of these things are true, but I'm saying they think that some of these ideas are so dangerous that we're not even going to be allowed to weigh the facts as presented to us by different people, to the point where they would delete channels, ban videos.
Around the time that was happening, you're incredibly right. There was this mass kind of hysteria on the platform end as to, we have so many different things that we need to stifle because they are dangerous to our prosperity. And I'm not sure why they deemed it so. Things like, as you're saying, flat Earth. If it's untrue, then let people decide for themselves. As far as I'm concerned, it's good content for anyone who's curious to rake in views or whatever. People are going to flock to this stuff and decide, basically, is what I'm saying. And it's great for ratings.
That's right. And what harm is it going to cause if somebody says, hey, the formula for seeing over the horizon, because the Earth is, curved according to the theory that we're on a planet, was that one's a heliocentric model, the other's the globular model, or whatever they call it. I don't know all the details. But according to science, modern science, the Earth has, 25,000 mile circumference. And if you're on a sphere look, I'm not pushing any of this. I'm just saying what I heard, because I look into conspiracy theories to sort of debunk them. Because when I heard flat Earth, I had to look into it. So according to science, it says that for every mile something is away from you, you can calculate how much of it is going to be beneath the visual horizon.
Yes.
So that formula, I believe, is however X many miles away squared times 8 inches. So because you lose 8 inches of visual range per mile times the distance squared. So say it's 10 miles away. So you square 10 miles. So 10 times 10 is 100. You multiply that by 8 inches. So that's how many inches of visibility you would lose on whatever object you're looking at. So when they started doing these calculations, they're like, okay, well, if the Chicago skyline is across this Great Lake and we're looking at it from this point, and you can go to Google Maps to get the exact distance, it was like 60 some miles away. They said, okay, according to this, the calculation should be that the Chicago skyline should be beneath 1,400 feet of horizon. And on a clear winter day when the conditions were just right and they have this high-powered zoom camera or telescope, they can see the entire Chicago skyline from top to bottom. And you're like, wait a minute. I don't know what that means, but the fact is you can go out there and replicate that experiment yourself. But the social media platforms thought this was so dangerous that you would even have the ability to watch this content. They deleted it, banned it, and just erased the accounts of the people who posted it. So many accounts were lost in 2017, 2018, 2019, and even during the last 3 years of the pandemic.
And I don't see what the purpose is in stifling those ideas. I mean, if anything, it's getting people back into physics independently, just researching physics. And as a person who still believes in the globular model of the Earth, I like listening to these things. I like hearing these alternate ideas and sort of thinking about them and just wondering, could this be a reality or could it not be?
And see, that's beautiful. This is why we're very similar, I think, because we have curious minds. We'd like to at least hear the evidence to weigh it on our own, not say,
Absolutely.
well, it's too dangerous. You can't hear this because we told you this. And over the last 3 years, there was a lot of that. And I agree with you.
Oh, yes.
If it was so ludicrous and stupid and ridiculous and farcical, why would you try to prevent people from just at least considering it and watching it? What's the big deal? So
right, they're doing citizen science and doing physical experiments. People should be allowed to do that, and it's weird that a single or multiple corporations and conglomeration will decide that no, this isn't what we want. There's something dangerous about this, which there isn't. There really isn't.
Exactly. Not to mention that it goes against our First Amendment rights, to free speech. But that's another topic.
Well, it's also a discussion as to whether these corporations who are publishing these videos have any sort of obligation to uphold the First Amendment.
Yeah, that's true. Because the government, of course, is obligated, and that's how they sort of get around it. It's a loophole. Well, the government may not be deleting these videos and content, but the corporations are now,
as advised by the CIA, and that's a conversation held for another day, and
exactly
get into that some other time. But actually, we've gone way off topic, Chai, and I've actually absolutely enjoyed it. But let's get to your personal experiences.
Sure. Well, I told you about my first paranormal experience with a thing that I felt was following me. The tree fell down, and I would have been killed. Now, the next thing that happened, of course, I joined up to travel. And from Hopewell, Virginia, I ended up with an exciting assignment in Blytheville, Arkansas, at Blytheville Air Force Base. Later, the name was changed to Acre Air Force Base. It's a B-52 Stratofortress base that has, I believe it was at least 7 nuclear-armed hot weapons, nuclear-armed B-52s ready to launch and drop bombs on our adversaries should nuclear war break out. And so I was stationed there, and one night, walking from my dorm, one of the benefits of being a young airman in the Air Force is that you get to eat for free. It's also not so much of a benefit because you have to eat at the dining hall. So that's your grand benefit and your grand limitation. It's like the Holy Grail from The Last Crusade. You can live forever, but you got to stay in that cave. So as you make more rank, they give you a basic allowance for subsistence, PAS, where they give you a few $100 and you can go buy whatever food you want. So anyway, I'm walking from my dorm to midnight meal. That's like a breakfast and snack line kind of meal made for the shift workers. But hey, young single guy, 18, 19 years old, I was hungry and I wanted to get some food. So I'm walking to the dining hall and it's like at least 11 o'clock. It's a clear, crisp winter night and the stars are bright and I'm a sky watcher. And so I'm hungry. I'm walking there. I happen to look up and I see 2 lights going across the sky at a moderate speed, not too fast. And I'm thinking, hey, I'm at a B-52 base, a bomber base, and I don't hear the engines because it's so high up that, you don't hear the engines. And I'm following these 2 dots of lights across the sky. And I'm thinking, okay, that's cool. And then they start doing a figure 8 pattern. And I'm thinking, that's not a bomber. And you get all this weird space music going through your head. At least I did. Like, wow, I'm actually seeing a UFO right now. My first UFO sighting. And then my next UFO sighting was a few years later. I was at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona. I was there for a 3-week, I believe it was either 10 days or 3-week military exercise. And I got up early. They had us staying out at some contracted hotel rooms off base, and we'd all meet up into a 6-pack, truck, Air Force truck, and drive on to base and do our exercise work. And I was the first one out there in the parking lot, in the courtyard parking lot of this hotel that we stayed in. And I happened to look up again. It's pre-dawn, but the sky is starting to light up a little bit in this deep, rich cobalt blue. And it's also, the sky is scalloped with these high altitude clouds that are just starting to light up a little bit, but it's still dark. And this singular light, just like the 2 lights I'd seen, it was like a dot of a light flickered across the sky. It looked like it moved like a leaf blowing in an autumn breeze on fast forward. It was like flickering across the sky in a mostly straight pattern, but it crossed from one side of the dome to the other. And it was above the layer of clouds. And I just thought, wow, what could that be? It's not a meteor because it wasn't going just in a straight line. It was actually flickering. And I'd never heard of any UFO sightings like that before. But since, after listening to other people, other accounts and reports, there have been quite a few reports of flickering kind of UFOs going across the sky. But I just thought, wow, what an amazing world we live in, where something like that just makes you so curious and you don't know what it is.
Absolutely. Now we're just about, actually, strangely enough, at the end of our time for the first episode. However, I'd like to keep you around to do another episode real quick.
You bet. I mean, and I'm sorry that we went off topic, but I
enjoyed the conversation immensely. It's what I'm into, and I really, really like talking to you about what we talked about. So we'll say goodnight to everyone who's listening currently, and if you are a patron, continue listening, because we have a bunch more for you.
All right. I would like to thank Chai one more time for coming on the show and sharing his experiences, but also his thoughts. And also thank you, Chai, for your service in the U.S. military. We really appreciate you here at Odd Virginia. Now, if you guys enjoyed listening to Chai, we'll get into much more of his personal experiences in the second half of this episode, which is round 2 with Chai Gallahan, available only to our Patreon and Buzzsprout supporters. So consider going down to the show notes and signing up today to become a supporter and accessing that extra episode with Chai Gallahan. Like I said at the beginning, I'm pretty busy right now, so I gotta go give my fare to Flea Bath. It's that time of year again. I was really hoping she would get through this summer without fleas, but it's happened. Shoot.
cracks and falls away, disappears into the floor. But I'm still here to face another day. Who could ask for something more? Sprays only help to mask the pain. again. Now I'm full of disappointment. I know you feel the same. And with full trepidation, I hope to make a change. But I'm not sure which direction, from which I even came. Take my words in context, you'll see we're both the same. We might have different faces, we might have different names.